I was asked to originally talk about faith and teaching, and I'm going to start with that and say tonight I would like to offer up my presentation for all educators currently teaching and or retired or just now entering the field because we have some challenges that await us, the likes of which we've never seen. And so as schools begin to open, not just here in Wyoming, but across the country and across the world, I would hope and pray that cooler heads will prevail, that everybody will be patient, and that we as teachers will be able to fill the minds of our children with knowledge that they need in this crazy world in which we live. So tonight I offer that up for all teachers. Lisa and the girls, Lisa and I and the girls, we love it here in Cody, and Cody's been good to us, and it's been an important part of the faith journey. I grew up in suburban New York City, where I was known as Vinny, or Little Cap, among other things. And I grew up in a conservative Catholic family. I was the fifth of 6 children. My parents were both first generation Americans. Their parents were immigrants. And I know for a fact that my Italian grandparents' records are still in Ellis Island. And I know that they stood on the deck of a ship and looked at the Statue of Liberty and read those words, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free." And that was in the early part of the 20th century. My upbringing was strictly Catholic, with the emphasis on the word strict, but fair for the most part. And we had church. We did not miss 10:30 Mass. I think I was a little traumatized by my dad applying Brill cream to my hair, trying to make it straight and part it, which always hurt a lot on Sunday morning. It was the one day a week my dad would comb our hair. And we would line up scared to death outside the bathroom. But he didn't do our hair if we went to 5 o'clock Mass on Saturday, which was great. And we also got to wear sneakers, which was kind of cool. But as I was sitting down trying to figure out exactly what I was going to visit with you about this evening, I decided that I wanted to kind of talk about this faith journey as kind of a 2 or 3 step process, from faith in church being a have to a need to a want to, now eventually to a get to go to church. And I think in doing so, we look at my upbringing. While it was strict, it was a church-based formation as opposed to a faith-based formation, which meant stage 2 was reciting prayer versus actually praying. And then finally, rather than just complying with what the church wanted, actually learning to practice faith. And so I'm going to go along those lines this evening with you a little bit. And I'm going to jump ahead and then come back. And I mentioned that Lisa's here. Lisa's one of 11 children from Cincinnati, Ohio. And I think her father, Dick Coles, a man who I admire tremendously, and I know Lisa loves and respects tremendously. See, that's crazy. That could be a voice from above. I don't know. Okay, all right. That's probably Jesus saying, "You get 30 minutes, Cappiello, nothing more." But Lisa's dad, Dick Coles, is a daily communicant and a faithful man, as is Lisa's mom, Pat. And their faith is quite admirable. And if I were ever to emulate faith in practice, I would want to emulate them. So I just thought I'd mention that. That's an important part of my formation. Going and learning the sacraments. And we were taught to define sacraments as an outward sign from God to give grace. And we were taught to memorize them in order. And we learned the importance of reconciliation and communion and confirmation and so forth, and to respect them as such. And I got to do a reading at both my first Holy Communion Mass and my confirmation mass. And so, Reverend Mary, I guess I was destined to be a worship leader when I came to Christ Church 2 years ago. I went along as a good student of Catholicism and Christian life until I met Dr. Demarest in junior year in high school in my Honors American Literature class, wherein he introduced me to the concept of existentialism. Yeah, and so Vinny decided he didn't want to go to church anymore. So he went to his parents and said, "Hey man, I just heard about this really cool thing called existentialism." And like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus and The Stranger and The Plague and The Rebel, And my dad just kind of laughed. He didn't even look up from the newspaper. Mom said, "Well, I think you should go talk to Father Netter. He was our pastor." So she made me an appointment with Father Netter. And I went in there all cool, 17 years old. And Father Netter, who'd known our family for probably close to 20 years, says, "Yeah, your mom visited with me. Let's have a nice visit." And we had a wonderful talk. And it finally came down to a question from him. And he says, "Is there anything about church you like?" And I said, "Yeah, I like the music." And he said, because we had two churches at our complex. We had a shrine church at St. Anthony's in Nanuet, New York. And we had what we called the new church, which actually now, nearly 50 years after it was built, I understand they still call it the new church. I like to go to the shrine church because it had a 4-part harmony, 30-voice choir that I always found to be just awesome and powerful. So Father Nether said, we have an adult choir here. You should join. I said, "Yeah, but Father, they're all old people." And he said, "But they need young voices." Well, you couldn't say no to that. And so I joined the adult choir at 17. And I have to say that was, in my faith journey, that was a huge step because I was able to refute all of Dr. Demarest's arguments about the positive aspects of existentialism. And in my faith life, I found someplace I was comfortable, and that was singing, dare I say, with the old people. But it was wonderful, and that kept me going to church. And then when I was in the Navy, I know a week or two ago we sang "Eternal Father, Strong to Save," which is the Navy hymn, which is near and dear to me. So, there's a lot of different things. And Marianne, you used the word intersection earlier. And I think my faith journey has had many intersections. Sometimes I've taken the right turn, sometimes maybe not so much, but ultimately it's led me down a path and a road that I'm quite proud of. When I was 20, I failed my physical at the end of my second year at the Naval Academy. And so I was given the choice of going into the Supply Corps or becoming a civilian again. And that was a tough decision, but I ultimately became a civilian again, which worked out pretty well because my parents moved to Ohio. I met Lisa, and truly, pardon the cliche, the rest, they say, is in fact history. Darn good history, I might add. I have some cheat notes here, I apologize. So, when you're in your mid-20s, Lisa and I got married at the church where, you'll forgive me if I'm wrong, Lisa, but were your parents married in St. Mary's? No, but your aunt and uncle were, correct? Okay. You know how churches are in big cities? They're like cathedrals in the West. And so her neighborhood church was where we got married, and 2 of our children ended up getting baptized there, one of them by my uncle who was a deacon. So there was a lot of intersection, if you will. But when we talk about praying, and I want to switch now a little bit to praying. I wrote these down. The first 4 prayers I learned are, "Now I lay me down to sleep," "Glory be," the Hail Mary, and the Our Father. And I think that's pretty standard for a lot of us. I know that "Now I lay me down to sleep," my grandfather had a special version of that one. He was a man of great faith. He would say, "Now I lay me down to sleep and shove some peanuts by my feet. If I should die before I wake, give them to my brother Jake." but but and then of course the act of contrition, which was important. But those prayers were recited. Now that foundation though of reciting prayer, I don't fault anyone for that, because I think for all of us as children, learning to recite prayers and having the discipline to do so is important in establishing your faith foundation. And I think it's later in life that you begin to really understand and appreciate what the words actually mean. For years, when I was a kid, we'd go to church and we'd either say or sing the Our Father. And a lot of us didn't understand what hallowed actually means. But if you study Shakespearean language, you know that when there's a past tense or an adjective with an ed on the end, it's its own syllable. So we would normally pronounce that hallowed, like the hallowed halls of Cody or Powell High School. But in this case, it was hallowed. And it reminds me of that little boy who went to church with his mom for the first time. And after church, they got in the car and were driving home. And the mom turns to the little boy and says, "Well, how'd you enjoy church?" And little Johnny says, "Oh, it was good. It was good." She said, "Was something wrong? Did you not feel the presence of the Lord?" "Well, I mean, I felt it and everything, but I'm a little confused, Mom." And Mom's like, "Well, what are you confused about?" "Well, all along up until today, you talked about Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit. And then we prayed the Our Father. And I'm a little confused now." She's like, "Well, why are you confused?" "Well, we said, 'Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.'" "Who's Harold?" And of course, the mom then had to explain what that meant. But as we get older, I think we do understand that prayer can and should be recited. But I think I've learned especially maybe in the last 10 years or so, the actual conversation you have with the Lord is what's truly important. And an old priest friend of ours, Father Wright from Powell, Wyoming, used to say, "Make your prayer requests very specific. Make your prayer requests very specific, because God is very busy." And also Father Daly would say two things: stay in constant communication with the Lord and live a sacramental life. And I think in my faith journey, I have fallen back on that constantly. Those are the two constants. That's always there. As I worked through my 30s, and Lisa and I had 3 absolutely beautiful children. Maggie's here, and Sarah and Gabby, the 3 of them. I mean, you talk about being blessed with wonderful girls. We really are. Love you, Maggie. She's a wonderful cook too, as you might have heard. So, we made sure, we've always said that we felt it was important for the children to be raised with religion in their lives, because once they get older, they can make their own decisions. That's fine. But again, that foundation I talked about earlier, that foundation, I believe, remains in all 3 of our girls, and will be there. And then they can decide later on, what their faith journey will be like and what road they'll take. So my prayer life during COVID, and I'm going to try not to make this a COVID talk, but I think our prayer lives during COVID have probably been a lot more requests and conversations with God as opposed to rote memorization. Now, the rosary, of course, is an important thing for some people also. But I think just having conversations with God about, wow, today was a tough day, and I'm just asking that maybe tomorrow could be a little better. Something as simple as that, goes a long way, and it affects a lot of people. And I'm going to ask a favor, actually, of each of you tonight, after we're finished and you go forth, that if you can take away one thing you find, one aspect of this talk tonight that you find inspirational or you connect with, I'd like you to share that with one person who's not here tonight. Just one person. And if they share it with one person, and it could be a message of hope, it would be wonderful if that would happen. So I just would ask each of you to consider that humble request. I think as the girls got older and we began to follow them around to their activities, whether it was school or taekwondo or music or swimming. Any swim parents out there? Oh my goodness. Swim parents put miles and miles and miles on their cars, maybe more than any other sports parents out there. I mean, that drive to Rollins and back on a Friday is kind of a tough one. But we enjoyed watching them grow up. We raised them to be merciful and compassionate and understanding. And I think we've done okay so far. And that's been another aspect of our faith journey, or my faith journey, that I've walked with Lisa side by side. And I'm proud of that. And, we always say that she's the one who keeps our family grounded. And I think that's true. So thank you for doing that. As we get older, I think also we think about communion versus the Eucharist, just like we think about rote memorization of prayer versus actually praying. That what is the value in the Eucharist, and what does it actually mean to receive the body and blood of Christ? And the importance of having reverence for it, which I think is a very personal thing, that relationship that we develop. And I can honestly say that that's one thing that when I was even younger, when I made my first communion, my parents sitting down with me and saying, "Do you understand why this day is so important?" Well, I did, except for the fact that I had such bad allergies on May 12th, 1973, that, yeah, I remember the date. Yeah. I had a horrible hay fever attack. Both my eyes swelled shut. But didn't realize I had asthma at the time. So I couldn't go to my formal portraits at Olaf Studios in West Nyack, New York. So I'm the only Cappiello boy or girl who has backyard photos taken by Dad, which actually wasn't so bad. But it was a great day, and we had a big party, and a lot of people came and shared that with me. I mentioned compassion earlier. I think also my faith journey has stretched outside Christianity to other realms of philosophy. I think the Dalai Lama's influence on the world is possibly grossly underestimated, because he is all about compassion. He's all about understanding why people behave the way they do. And I have a little book I keep on the coffee table in our family room, our living room, that I don't read it every day, but I'll flip it open and look for a verse when I need some inspiration. And so I think that's something that compassion is something that we're maybe lacking a little bit of in society. And in our faith journey, though, sometimes we hit these blocks, and that saying, and I'm probably going to get it wrong, but God never gives you more than you can handle, or can't handle. I'm not sure which it is, but sometimes I feel like you can't handle it. And you pray and ask why. Why are these things happening? In my first stint at the Cody Enterprise, I was managing editor on September 11th, 2001. And I remember thinking to myself, I have a tremendous responsibility right now to the readers. How am I going to do this? What am I going to do to not only report what happened, but perhaps give people hope? And so some of you might remember the headline in the Cody Enterprise was, "Why, God, why?" And Father Wright had said, some of you are asking right now, why, God, why would you let this happen? And that was not, in his mind, the right question to ask. And he talked about the choice that the terrorists made, that they chose evil over good. And that's why it happened. So I think I gave people hope. We showed them where to go to get information. We gave them phone numbers and email addresses and websites and resources so they could cope with this horrible tragedy. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that headline. That was 200-point size. And Quincy, I know you're a layout person, so you know that's big and bold, and it needed to be. And we got one complaint. Got one older lady up the North Fork who called me and said, "Why are you blaming God?" And I said, "Well, ma'am, if you would just read the story, you'll understand why we chose to cover the event this way." She didn't call back. So what has this led me to? Well, I think it's led me to several things in my faith journey. Inner peace, which I think when Maggie and I drive back and forth to Powell, we have a playlist you listen to, and there's a great Boston song called Peace of Mind. Some of you may know the words too. And it's just one of those songs about, like, if you're feeling kind of low about the dues you've been paying, the future's going much too slow. I don't know the next verse, maybe NJ, you know it, but it's all about finding your place where you can find inner peace. I find inner peace in writing. Most of you know I'm a writer, and whether I'm writing a novel or I'm writing a column or a blog or a poem or a haiku with my students, pour my heart and soul into writing. And I think I find inner peace within myself, whether it's hiking with Maggie up in the Bighorns, driving across I-90, the entire state of South Dakota, with Sarah, or sharing an adult beverage with my oldest down in Denver, or Lisa and I having date night, and you pick up a pizza and watch a couple of episodes of The Office. I find that to be wonderful and wonderfully peaceful. This has also led to acceptance in my life. I've learned to accept my faults and try to right those wrongs. I'm learning to accept God's plan, though sometimes I question it, but I'm trying. Have I turned it over 100% to God like some people have? I'm going to be honest, not yet. But I'm getting there. And it's also, the third thing I wanted to mention is it's led us to this evening and being part of this wonderful group of people at Christ Church. The first day Maggie and I came to service, Reverend Mary read a letter from the bishop. It was after the church in Lander had been vandalized with those hate messages. And in the letter, and I don't remember the exact wording, but it was something to the effect of, know that you are loved. Know that you are loved. And Maggie and I kind of looked at each other, and boy, we had a moment, didn't we? And we've had a few of those since we came here. Delivering the Lenten packages before Holy Week was a wonderful experience. Knocking on doors with my mask on and putting the bag down and stepping away, waving, making sure people had what they needed for Holy Week, you know. And of course, here this evening. And I'm going to conclude with one last item. And Al, if I'm going too long, just let me know, because you know all about that.
I know you, and I know what an inspiration you've been to children in this community. Hard to believe, just 20 years, your impact.
Thank you, Al.
I know.
Thank you. So, my brother John, who is one of the finest people I've known in my life. He's 3 years older than me. He lives in suburban New York City with his wife Jeannie and their daughters Kayla and Kristen, who have since moved out and have their own lives. But John is involved in Men's Cornerstone program at his church, and for years he's been asking me to come back and be part of this, and we've never really been able to work it out until just this past January. Some of you guys know, besides teaching, I work up at the airport part-time throwing bags, and so we get to fly on standby. So I was able to work it out that I could fly to New York and be with my brother and 70 other men for 26 hours on a Saturday, Sunday, talking about things that are important to Christian men, Catholic men. Some of them were actually atheists who were there. Others were agnostic. We had all kinds. We didn't care. And I was able to attend the Men's Cornerstone. On the plane ride there, I realized I had failed to do something. And one of the traditions of Cornerstone is that you are asked to write a letter to someone who is there. And in the past, I've written 3, 4, 5 letters through the years to my brother John, telling him how important he is to me. Lisa and the girls have done the same. And it's really nice, because you just get to say nice things about good people. Well, I realized on the plane, as it was my chance to go to Cornerstone, I had neglected to write this letter for my brother. And so I took out my laptop and I started pounding away on the keyboard, as I do. And when I write, I just kind of let my fingers go, and I don't try to think too much. We writing coaches call it flying versus futzing. So don't go back and hit backspace, you just fly. And I felt so inspired that morning on the plane that I told John, John has always been a person who is there for me in ways I simply can't describe, as older siblings often are. And when we lost our little sister to cancer 5 years ago, it was John who held the family together through that difficult time. Anytime there's been drama or difficulty, it's always been him. And also as my big brother, we spent 1 year together in high school running on the same track team, and I looked up to him in ways that, it just brings a smile to my face. I'm so proud of him, and he inspires me still. So I told him that, I said, John, it reminds me of that painting. And I did print it, and I'm sorry it's so far away, but I'll pass it around here. Or maybe you've seen this painting. It's a picture of Christ, the risen Christ. Oh, thank you, man. It's a picture of the risen Christ holding up a man who is clearly exhausted and maybe even injured, and he's holding a wooden mallet. And it's clear that without Jesus holding him up, he would fall. And in writing and learning a little more about the painting, I learned that it is called Forgiven, and it's by Thomas Blackshear. And it's designed to depict the fact that no matter how far we stray away during our journey, Jesus will always be there to hold us up. And I liken that to the relationship I have with my brother John. He has always been the one to hold me up. And so I said to him in this letter, I said, John, if ever we need to switch roles, know that I would do it in a millisecond. And I know I've relied on you to hold me up many times. But if I can do the same for you, then I would do it happily. I said, it kind of reminds me of Footprints. The poem Footprints by Carol and Joyce Carty. In researching this, I discovered it was written in 1963 and actually is an adaptation of an Ella H. Schering-Hausen poem that was written in 1922 and ironically published on June 6th, 1922. And 22 years later, June 6th would take on quite an important bit of, be important in our world history, because if I'm not mistaken, that was D-Day, which took place on a beach. And so I told John that along with the painting, the poem Footprints seemed to describe our relationship. And if I may, one night a man had a dream. He dreamed he was walking along the beach with the Lord. Across the sky flashed scenes from his life. For each scene he noticed two sets of footprints in the sand, one belonging to him and the other to the Lord. When the last scene of his life flashed before him, he looked back at the footprints in the sand. He noticed that many times along the path of his life there was only one set of footprints. He also noticed that it happened at the very lowest and saddest times in his life. This really bothered him, and he questioned the Lord about it. Lord, you said that once I decided to follow you, you'd walk with me all the way. But I have noticed that during the most troublesome times in my life, there was only one set of footprints. I don't understand why, when I needed you most, you would leave me. The Lord replied, my son, my precious child, I love you and I would never leave you. During your times of trial and suffering, when you see only one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you. And so I wrote to John and told him that I felt like that really described our relationship. So I printed the letter, put it in an envelope, and when we went to the Cornerstone weekend, there are boxes with everybody's name on it that has letters in it. And there's 70 men there. And at a very vulnerable point in the weekend, with maybe 3 hours or so left, in a very intense, prayer-filled, faithful experience, you are presented with this envelope full of letters from loved ones. And of course, Lisa and the girls wrote beautiful messages. My parents, my old track coach, friends from high school, my brother had reached out to them and said, hey, Vin's going to be doing this Cornerstone. Cornerstone weekend, and it'd be nice if you could reach out to him. It was stunning. Before this happened, though, this was on Saturday night. On Sunday, or rather on Friday, John and I had to go to the church to set up for the weekend. Now, most guys don't know what's going on at Cornerstone. It's kept secret for a reason, because they want to kind of throw some curveballs at you to get you thinking and not be so predictable. But I knew the basic format, and I knew the letters were coming. So John said, "Hey, Vin, you and I and a couple of the guys, we need to go into the church and get a couple of things set up for the penance service tonight." So we went into the church, and the first thing John said was, "All right, we got to set up the cross, and then on the cross we need to hang a painting." I said, "Okay, great." And so 3 of us carried the cross up onto the altar. Now that was the first time I got the chills on the weekend. The second time was when they unfurled the painting. It was that painting. It was the forgiven painting. It's like it chills again. Now I don't say anything. Then at the penance service the next night, the reading was footprints. And I got chills again. Now, I saw John after he read his letter. And he's like, "Yeah, that was really great. Thanks, Vin. I really appreciate that." John thought I had written the letter on Friday night after we had set up. He was not aware that I had written it the day before. Now, if that's not the power of God at work, I'm not sure what is. And in this faith journey that we're all on, we are going to have intersections. We might take a wrong turn now and again, but I'm sure glad that I came to an intersection and turned towards Christ Church. And I am ever grateful to all of you for listening tonight. I know I went long, but again, your faith journey is yours and yours alone. And remember that Christ is always walking with you. Yes, ma'am. Right.
Could you reiterate those 4 for me? Because to me, that's the essence of what
So it was have to, then it was need to, then it was want to, and last it's get to. So does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Right. Like I think we all want to get to the get to part of our lives, and maybe we're not there yet. And thinking that I get to go to church. There are some countries where you don't get to go to church and you don't get to worship. We get to. And that's one of my little prayers that whenever I'm at church, I always thank the Lord for the opportunity to live and work and worship in a place where I am comfortable and happy. And I'm always thankful for that. So have to, need to, want to, get to. I would love to answer questions if you have any. Yes, ma'am.
How did you go from a Catholic church to the Episcopal church?
Boy, am I still on Facebook Live? I made the correct turn at the intersection.
Well, I know you walked across the street.
Well, it's interesting. A little bit of research, actually, and also having attended some services here through the years. If I had to really pinpoint one thing, it was the Blue Christmas service that I covered. I covered for the Enterprise my second time. It was right after my sister passed, and it was very difficult Christmas that year for our family. And I was seeking something and saw that this was going to be happening. And actually, believe it or not, it's either in, I think it's in Mike Galligan's office. It's actually hanging. The article I wrote is hanging on the wall. And I think it was, oh my gosh, I heard the bells on Christmas Eve. It was that particular service that night that I carried with me. And I think we've been back a couple of times since then for that. So I would say it was that event specifically that I felt a real sense of peace while I was physically in the church. So I'm gonna truncate my answer there. But that's a fair question. I would love to take other questions. If there are none, thank you so much. What a wonderful audience you guys are.